All right, this is PH2T3R, Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And we are here today with CB Robertson and Bronson from Moss and Blood and a number of other enterprises that he's always working on. He's joining us from India, so if the power cuts out, he may have to jump back in at some point, but that's fine. And today we're going to talk about running. And the two of these guys both ganged up and displayed an interest in spiritual running recently. And we had a running challenge in the Order of Fire recently, which mostly they did. But some other guys did it as well. And, but it is a thing. A lot of guys, there's a lot of talk about lifting. There's a lot of talk about combat sports and other things like that. But running is also running is a survival skill. And if you can't run away, I guess you have to fight. But running is something that we all really should be able to do at least for a certain distance. It's definitely a core competency, I think. So with that said, let's just get started because they have a lot of interesting things to talk about regarding running. We're not just going to talk about I don't know, like splits or technical things about running because that's not the right crew for this. This is the philosophical crew, so we'll talk about the philosophy of running. So, Christopher, I think you have some things you'd like to talk about.
Well, sure. I like the introduction with running away from things, which is, of course, value. He who learns to run away lives to fight another day, or however the saying goes. But I'm not convinced that's true with long distance running. Our friend Josh, who actually won our challenge, so we have to send him his prize for that. But he was making fun of me on my longer runs, like, "What are you running from?" And of course, anyone who's running away from something like a cougar or a bear, they better be sprinting like hell, like the way an antelope or a deer will sprint away. But that long distance endurance, lope. The only other animal I know of, I'm sure there's more that does that, are wolves. And humans are better than wolves at long distance running. It's an entirely predatory activity. There is no purpose in running away with jogging. It's only useful for tracking and wearing down and eventually killing prey animals. And you see this with the greatest human predators. We have people like Cameron Hanes, who runs ultra marathons as training for his elk bow hunting season. And you have, Navy SEALs like David Goggins and guys like that who will do that just to push themselves and see. But all the great, human warriors and hunters are also endurance athletes. And to run away, you don't need that. But if you're going to hunt something down, you do.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective that you said about some of the greatest warriors also, because one of the people that actually inspired me to start running fasted was Conor McGregor. And he had it's just this very short clip that he had, but it really struck me when he was saying, you know, in the wild, or I guess in earlier human times, when people would be pursuing game, usually you're pursuing game because you're hungry. And so just as a mental tactic to kind of invoke that primal energy, he would do all of his morning runs without eating in order to stay hungry, to feel that hunger while he's in that pursuit. And I thought that was just a really interesting tactic. And, that's like many training modalities that we have. Usually we're trying to simulate something and from the past that is no longer necessary in order to kind of maintain that natural animal instinct that we have for different things, but obviously they're not always necessary. But I think it's just when you do participate in running, guys that really push themselves to the limit get to experience that engagement with the primitive man inside of all of us. It's a feeling that I get, at least, once I hit a certain point in certain distances where you're just in the flow. And especially if you're trail running, like I don't really like road running that much, but if you're trail running, and for me, when I was doing my spiritual running here in India, this was totally new terrain for me. So, you're gliding over new terrain, you're having to navigate trails that you've never ran on before. And it can bring about a lot of things inside of us, I think, that are dormant, that can't really be activated unless you're in a physical pursuit like running, a literal pursuit, or I guess a metaphorical pursuit, as we were doing with the spiritual running in the Order of Fire.
Yeah, it taps into, I mean, long distance running, which is permitted by sweating, which other mammals can't do because they have too much hair for that. That's one of the defining things about human beings. Our more complex vocal range and the sort of subsequent complex language, and our ability to throw, and our ability to keep running. We can run down like horses, or all kinds of other things. That's as species defining as anything else about us. And so when you do that run, and you get through that first wall of pain into that euphoria and that almost sense of freedom of, holy shit, I can keep going, I can keep doing this for a lot longer than I thought, sensation is not just connecting you to a deeper part of yourself, it's connecting you to a whole line of humanity, of who you are at like a species level. And I think it's healthy for people to connect with that. And it's not spiritual in a specific religious kind of sense, but it's spiritual in the sense of connecting with the spirit that created your very species and your purpose as one of the strangest and most dangerous kinds of mammalian predators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think our challenge especially was, I was cracking jokes at guys in the group the other day about this, about just it was interesting that the push-up challenge versus the running challenge participation was so low with the running versus the push-ups. And I kind of made a joke about leg day, but I think it's actually more a reflection of like where people are at physically and mentally, and even just as a culture. I thought that was interesting, because there are many people who will literally never sprint or run long distances for the rest of their adult lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to, I guess, not allow your blade to get dull, both physically and mentally, because like you were saying, there's a certain point in a run where you cross over the pain threshold and you actually get better. And I don't know if there are very many physical pursuits or physical training where that occurs outside of long distance running. Like with weightlifting, you reach like failure in a set, but you don't really reach a pain threshold where you actually become a better lifter.
Right.
And so I think that's a really
That's called the point of injury.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how you feel about that or what your experience was with running, but I find it's just, there's almost an evolution that happens in a long distance run where you actually get better. And that's only really something you can experience, I think, when you're really pushing your limits. And maybe that is a uniquely human thing to, I guess, that maybe that's a spiritual side of the physical pursuit of running. And maybe that's what people are experiencing when they're having a spiritual run, is this, this evolution that happens through the course of a long distance run.
I think that, well, there is comparable to that, I would say. I mean, it's not really a real sport, but CrossFit stuff. Because of the massive like cardio overload that you get when you're doing like we had like 10 rounds of 50 burpees or, something like that. And, there's this threshold of like, I can't do this anymore. And then if you keep going past that, there's something similar, I think, that happens where, and it does increase in the way that probably running does, but in a different way, because it's a different kind of cardio. But that's what pushes your VO2 max up, is like, okay, well, I did all these really hard things. And that's, my boxing coach always used to say that it's like changing your pocket. Cardio is like changing your pocket. Like it's just, money in your pocket, it just goes away if it long enough. Very much, it's like, if you do that kind of stuff on a regular basis, your cardio is like through the roof. And that's also why people do those things in groups, because it's actually really hard to self-motivate to push yourself that hard. And then whereas running, I think it's more like you keep going and going. I remember we had a joke, Afi and I, back in the day, my old assistant, we were, taking boxing classes together, and he would just send us out for a run as part of the class. And, he sent us out the first time he sent us out for a 5-mile run. I don't think either of us had ever run more than like 2 miles. And, we got to a point and he made a joke. He's like, every step is further away from the Shire than we've ever been before. So, and we ended up doing that, I think like an 8K or something like then later that year. And that was fun. There is a thing where you get past a certain point of like, okay, well, this is how far I've ever been able to go. And then you keep going. I get what you guys are saying. My sister she ran her 50-second marathon, not too long ago. And it's just been a weird thing watching her do that for all these years. She started doing it when she had kids. And I think a lot of people do that actually, because they get up at 4:00 in the morning and they go run for a really long time, and then they can deal with life, because they have it's their me time, like where they're just by themselves or just like with one other person, but you're quiet, and they're getting like their own like solitary time. It's like a meditative thing for a lot of people. I think that's why she's doing it. But I also, she's also addicted to it in the way that power lifters are addicted to powerlifting. Yeah. Like at this point, she knows that she should probably stop running marathons, because that's a different thing than just like distance running sometime. I mean, she's done several this year, and it's like over time there's a wear and tear issue, I think,
probably. Yeah.
And it's kind of fucked up her thyroids and all kinds of stuff. Like there's been a lot of issues, but which who knows if it's everybody's different.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard a number of people make the argument that everyone gets addicted to something at some point. So if your choice of addiction is CrossFit or marathons instead of meth, you could do worse,
That's fair.
If you go with coffee and Gold Monster instead of alcohol, also probably good, and it's true. Running can get addictive. And it was very interesting to hear the sorts of reasoning that people give for why they like strength training but not running. There's the physique argument that they'll bring up. They'll point to some marathon runner who's like, he looks like he's fresh out of Auschwitz, like not good. But I mean, you could point to really grotesque, hypertrophied bodybuilders that look not even human anymore in like a bad way. And then there are, strong men who are insanely impressive and also look fat. Like at the extremes of any of these sports, you're going to get some odd appearances, but long distance running is actually odd because you can get ultra marathon runners like Dean Karnazes, or who also rock climbs and wakeboards or whatever, or Cameron Haynes or David Goggins. All of these guys have run like the Badwater Ultra Marathon. All of these guys have done these 150, 200 mile races and placed, and they're built in their upper body. They've got bigger traps than a lot of the guys who are, talking down on running.
Nick Barr is another one. Nick Barr just competed in a competitive bodybuilding. He owns a supplement company. He's more jacked than I am, more jacked than most people are. And, he's running, anywhere from 15 to 20 miles a day. So there's lots of guys that do that and who have just incredible muscular physiques, so Yeah, it's interesting that there's always
Yeah.
these extremes on either end of the spectrum of fitness.
Yeah, and the point is they're compatible. You can do both. you don't have to choose. Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is like sort of what Bronson was saying before, is that like there is pain in weightlifting for sure, especially on those like heavy squats and stuff. But it's not that sustained pain. It's not like ripping off the same band-aid over and over again for, an hour. It's like one hard, maybe if it's a really hard lift, a 10, 15 second burst. Whereas with running, I did, I think my peak this last month was a 12-mile run, which took me a couple hours to do. And that wasn't even that bad because I wasn't pushing myself as hard as I did later with some 6-milers and stuff. But going through that pain for a long time takes a lot of willpower to keep going in a way that the short bursts and stuff, it's not the same kind of pain that you're enduring. And I think a lot of the guys,
it's endurance pain.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that quite reasonably scares and puts off a lot of people.
Yeah.
It did for me. The only reason I started cross country back in school was I wanted to be a better soccer player. I hated long distance running, but I stuck with running and stopped playing soccer and kept running even after soccer. It was just the habit at that point.
Yeah.
But
the interesting thing about it too is, like, I think for most people who run, they don't get up in the morning psyched to go and do a run the way that most people get up in the morning psyched to go and get a pump at the gym. It's like there's also that mental hurdle occurs every workout. At least for me, it does. Like, if I get it in the back of my mind that, okay, I'm going to commit to, running 10 to 20 kilometers, it's like every time that you lace up to do that, there's a certain amount of talking yourself up to it. So there's always, it's just the next level of overcoming, and you're having to overcome that obstacle repeatedly. And then you have to overcome that obstacle repeatedly during the run. And I think that's why people who get to the point where they're doing like 200-mile races just have so much resilience, because it's just a muscle in your mind that you're building. And that's David Goggins' whole thing with his long distance running. He's always training the mind, and he goes to some extremes that are obviously unhealthy, but that's true for anyone who's running basically over like 6 miles,
right.
Or I guess for me it's kilometers. So I do everything kilometers. So like anything over, 10 kilometers is a hard run. The first run that I didn't train for it all. I was just like, this seems like something hard that would be fun and satisfying to overcome. And so I entered like a 10K, which for most people that really run, that's like an easy morning jog. But for me, I'd never ran before. I was mostly lifting at the time. And it was just really interesting, the process that your mind goes through as the distance goes on. And, you reach a point where kind of somewhere in the middle, you are experiencing a lot of pain. But to David Goggins' credit, his 40% rule, where, basically once you think you've got nothing left, I think it's either you're at 40%, you've got 40% more in you. And once you push past that threshold, that is really true. At least I experienced that. And the pain subsided for the majority of the run, or at least it was curbed by the resilience in my mind and was no longer affecting me mentally, and allowed me to push even harder in the run. And even just in addition to that, the fact that you're racing versus running solo, from a performance aspect and just the perspective of pushing your own personal resilience, like my times, I beat my previous times by like a full minute on each mile, or on each kilometer. And it's just really interesting how unique that is as far as the pursuit of running goes, and just how much resilience you do build by doing runs regularly or competing in runs. It's just, I don't know, I've done basically every kind of training, and I think with running there isn't anything that builds your mental strength more than that. And it's kind of interesting, because obviously with the Order of Fire, we have a lot of, things that are, we do things mythically in the Order of Fire. And in Navajo culture, there's something called the run of life. And it's basically a metaphor for life, that you go through this journey of your spiritual run in order to build resilience in your run that translates or is a metaphor for the struggles in life that you'll be better at overcoming, by doing these practices.
I like that a lot. The myth side of it is always fascinating because being the Homer nerd I am, I always go back to, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And what you have in Odysseus is a man who is a man of endurance, not running specifically, but there's this funny scene where he's on the island of the Phaeacians and they're doing their games, and someone challenges him to a foot race, and he says, "Oh no, I can't." He basically says, I can't sprint. I'm like slow. I can't do that. But he's got very big legs that some people amusingly comment on. No, that's the different book. The suitors comment on at the end, getting my feast scenes mixed up. But he can outcompete them in other events, and he can keep going. And it's like many of these other famous sailor stories, like Kon-Tiki, the Thor Heyerdahl and the Nordic explorers who crossed the Pacific in a raft, essentially, or the fittingly named Endurance, the story of Ernest Shackleton and his crew who got broken up on the ice, and his family motto was "Through endurance we conquer." And unlike Odysseus, he was able to bring his whole crew home in one alive. But that endurance seems to be associated with older men and with life, whereas in the Odyssey, or in the Iliad, I'm sorry, the more youthful and attractive to passionate young men, Achilles, is his epithet is swift-footed. He's the sprinter. He's the explosive man with explosive passion. And that's attractive. It has a lot of appeal to young men who feel that way, who can connect with that. But there seems to be a pattern where as men mature and get older, I think this was true of Adam Nicholson as well. He said as he got older, he became more of an Odyssey person and began to connect with that endurance over time. And I can't remember if you or Jack brought this up earlier, but the age participation in running. There's a wonderful book called Born to Run by Chris McDougall, who talks about this and brings in some data and says if you draw a graph where with the average age of a participant in a marathon, and then you find the 2 points where on one side you have 18, which is like the youngest adults that can participate. What's the opposite end of that graph that is equal in, was it number of participants as the 18-year-olds from the middle point? I'm sure I'm setting this up horrifically wrong, but you have this extraordinary span of age ranges. And I think the equivalent number was in the 70s. Like people in their 70s are participating in marathons at a similar rate to people who are 18, which is unheard of in any other sport. No other sport. And strangely, women seem to be, competitive to a similar degree, not exactly the same level as men, but like much closer than you would see in like powerlifting. Mm. So, which again speaks to the more generally and uniquely human nature of this thing.
It's interesting too, because I think I feel that I'm obviously I'm in my 30s. I'm still a young buck, but I think like if you're someone who is always trying to get better, running is something you can pretty much continue to get better at for the rest of your life, as long as you stay relatively healthy and injury free. Like we've talked a lot. I think, Jack's talked about this a lot, especially with powerlifting. There's a certain point of diminishing returns. you only have so many PRs in your life when it comes to powerlifting. And if you want to continue to get better, you need to be able to pivot and find other pursuits that you can actually continue to excel at, to get that feeling of becoming better and the rush of seeing, incremental progress over time. And, you, like you were saying, you see people who are in their 70s, maybe, I don't know people in their 70s, what their times are like, but I definitely know that there are guys in their 50s and 60s, who are my dad's age, who are still crushing marathons, like getting awesome times, running super long distances. They're able to run frequently, and you're able to push yourself like that. And it's, it's kind of a testament to what you're saying, between the age difference and the gender difference, the fact that everyone who is human can excel at running and continue to excel and get better at running throughout the course of their life.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there is a differentiation between body types a little bit with running. Like
Sure.
I saw this guy at the gym today, and God bless him, because he just, like everybody gets the hand that they're dealt, and this dude had the biggest ass and the biggest like thighs that I've ever seen on a man, and he's built that way. That's just like how he came out, obviously, so he was working on his legs, and that's his thing, and he's like, he's a short guy. And he was just super fucking stocky. Like that dude is not running anywhere fast, But God bless him. He had his shirt.
Good point.
He had one of those shirts on that said "thick thighs save lives." It was a hot girl on it or whatever. And I was like, okay, he knows who he is. He's got it figured out. Whatever. I thought it was a really good way. It was just kind of cool to see. But I mean, there's definitely like a different. I mean. When I was delivering treadmills, we did a lot of, when I was delivering exercise equipment in Oregon, which is like running Capital, whatever, Nike, all that stuff. And especially like what's that guy that the movie was about? Prefontaine. Yeah. And so it's a state of that. Oh, we just lost Bronson. He said Prefontaine has disappeared. I'm sure he'll pop back in. Oh, there he is. He's back. Do I have to let him in again?
Hopefully.
Okay. No, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, what happened when I was delivering, we used to actually deliver treadmills to Olympic competitors, to Olympic runners. And so we walk into their house and they'd have the wall full of Nikes that they've been given, to do they can wear a different pair every day. And, deliver these special treadmills to them, and then they could. One of them, I think, had one with grass on it. Like that was about. I don't think they used that. That was a different thing that was kind of a thing that was coming out. But they had treadmills where they were suspended slightly, where it would actually lift them up and take some of the weight off them while they were running, so they could still get the miles in without the body stress. Which I thought was interesting, without the full body stress. I mean, obviously they had body stress, but not the full weight of them.
Yeah.
But I also noticed that they were both built like birds.
Right.
It was a husband and wife, and they were both like Olympic runners and competitors, and like the size of their ankles and shoes, they were like very thin bird-like people. And I think to be highly competitive at certain things. Obviously, you've cited some examples of different guys who are like, break the mold on that. But I think generally speaking, that at the highest levels, they tend to be thin people. And the other thing that was interesting was they had, because you'll kind of appreciate this because you do installations and stuff. We were in this house delivering these treadmills, and all of a sudden you start to get like kind of like spacey. And we realized we were in a Colorado mountain room, where they pull the like air. So it's like you're at a high elevation, and they live in that so that they can fly around the world and train. Yeah. So you start to get like space. So they're at that extreme level of the game, like that's the stuff that they're doing. So that was kind of a cool experience to see that. But
simulating 6,000, 8,000 feet, whatever.
Yeah. And that, but I mean, that's like I said, as far as running, there is a thing like I think there are obviously certain body types that are better for it.
Sure. And just like powerlifting, like I do not look. I'm close, but I don't look exactly like Hafthor Bjornsson. So I'm not gonna be doing probably quite 1,000-pound deadlifts, in my
there's a
near
frame
future. Right. But that doesn't mean that I can't get better at lifting. And the same way that like some people don't have that Ethiopian physique, right? They're not going to be just naturally. And Ethiopians are interesting because they're like, people don't know that Ethiopia is basically on this plateau at super high altitude. And so they're actually already at that altitude frame, and their bodies have actually adapted to that altitude in a way that is conducive to long distance running that Tibetans and Andeans did not. They adapted in different ways. Just a little cool tidbit of anatomical, difference there. But so not everyone's going to be, like a winning ultra marathon runner. Right. But that doesn't mean like, some cheetahs are going to be faster than other cheetahs, but all cheetahs are still designed to kill antelope by running.
Yeah.
And
it's the same argument we make all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just because you're not going to be the best doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you aren't built for this purpose. Yeah. And that was one of the central points of Christopher McDougall's book. And the reason he called it Born to Run is because he had suffered an injury. He was a GQ sports writer, and he kept trying to run, and he kept screwing up his knee, and he kept going to all these different sports med doctors, and they kept saying, you just don't have the physique for it. Don't try it. You're just not born to run.
That's what the doctors always say.
About everything. You should be try swimming, try an elliptical, try a Nordic ski machine, do these other things, whatever. And he just refused to give up. And in his refusal to give up, he went down this long rabbit hole about anatomy and ergonomics and running, and found out that a well-intentioned gentleman, also from Oregon, I think, who invented the jogging shoe with the intention of trying to get more Americans out jogging, accidentally caused people to start running heel to toe, which with enough cushioning feels comfortable, but in fact puts a lot of impact stress on your knees that you don't get when you're running on the balls of your feet. And so like the one big takeaway from the Born to Run book is like, if you're going to run on the balls of your feet is actually like the better way to do it. And there's this funny like barefoot Ted character that keeps coming through that story. But I've been running with minimalist, not quite Vibrams, but sort of Amazon cheap, pretend Vibrams, probably half the time I go for runs. It's just a killer calf workout, but I'm sympathetic to a lot of the people who have some other injury, like they got their hip blown up in an IED or something, or they had a really bad knee injury, or they tore their ACL playing soccer or running back or something, and now it's like that's different. But the fear of injury with running, I think would be as misplaced as the fear of ripping your bicep doing a deadlift in powerlifting. Like injuries are always a risk, but you in any case you're more likely to suffer injuries sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day in the long run than you are of having the will to get up and be active instead.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also just as far as the entry level point of it, it really helps if you're already lean.
That's true.
When I see a dude who looks like I'm going to get in shape and he's like over 220 pounds running, unless he's a really just, there are jacked dudes that are 220 pounds. But that's because they're big. But a guy who's, my size and 220, 230 pounds, I'm like, you need to get on elliptical first. You like it because it hurts. I mean, it hurts not in like that cool, like euphoric, like cool way. But if you're a really heavy guy and you're
that'll wreck your knees.
Running is not the right start.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, just walk.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. Like 100%. It's like they can do it eventually, but I think that's, so many Americans are obese that like, you're not going to send them out running right away. because it is one of those things you want to be in a healthy weight range to do.
Oh yeah. But if you're like seriously overweight, but if you start a program of going out for a 20-minute walk a day and not like meandering, but like a serious walk, you're going to lose weight.
Oh yeah.
Like it will help to fix your diet too, and you'll have to wait some time, but you will lose weight. I've tried running with backpacks and with 45-pound weight vests, and it's pretty brutal. And you get a taste of what that might be like if you're like, oh, if I had an extra 45 pounds, I was trying to run. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do a sub 7-minute mile.
Yeah, I'm always confused about people. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Bronson, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I mean, that's actually just such a good example of why people who don't want to run, even guys who have, a significant amount of size and strength, should run is, like you were saying, it's like, okay, so you throw a bit of extra weight on your body and everything is now harder, or your hips you're discovering all these issues in your hips, or these imbalances in your ankles, or inflammation in the tendons in your feet. It's like, those are things that you are able to train through running that you can't by just sitting there pumping weights. It's like putting a different kind of stressor on the body is just good for all life things. It's like if you're maybe a 220-pound overweight person, isn't going to reach the point where they're bench pressing or they have the physique that they want, but like by just getting to the point where they could go for a short run without it injuring them is going to improve almost every aspect of their life. So that's another part of it too.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said about the physical side, but there's also the cognitive and mental side as well. I mean, it's been known for a very long time. It's only been discovered within the last like 5 or 10 years, I think, that weight training also has a lot of very serious mental beneficial effects. It staves off cognitive decline a lot. But running does that as well. And I can't imagine they do it in exactly the same way. And you would probably be getting different benefits from doing both than just doing one or the other. So as far as injury prevention, staying active is probably just as good for injury prevention as it is for, getting injured.
I always try to keep heavy. I equally hate the idea of super heavy guys going into powerlifting too, because then they'll just stay super heavy. Like they need to get on elliptical or go for a walk or do something like that and get moving and lose weight before, because if you sit them under a bar, they're just going to start working for PRs, because that's what dudes do, and they're going to be like, gotta eat for power, and they'll just get bigger. So I always, whenever somebody's like they're heavy and they're like, I think I want to lose weight, I'm going to start like powerlifting. No. That's
you'll start eating gummy bears for every single one of your workouts every day. You'll be eating cheeseburgers for post-workout refeeds. It's
like a dirty form of like body positivity or whatever. Like there's gonna be people around you that'll be like, no, you're beautiful just the way you are. Like you're strong but pretty, like strong and pretty, or whatever the shirt is.
I saw this hilarious interview where this woman was interviewing a Russian powerlifter, and she's like, if you're so strong, how come you don't even have a six-pack? And he's like, a six-pack is not a sign of power. A six-pack is a sign that you don't eat enough. And this is a pretty like 10 out of 10 for quippy responses, but like it is better to have a lower body fat. It is better to not be strongman fat. As impressive as those guys are in their own way.
Yeah. Well, someone just made a post about it the other day that I was laughing about, because one of the guys in our group was on a rant about balance. He hates being told to find balance. One of the guys in the Canadian crew, and I actually sent it to him today.
Everything is about balance.
Yeah. And he's like, "Damn it!" And really, I mean, those guys are, everyone who's at the extreme level of any sport, as you were saying earlier, is not in balance. Like they're at an extreme level. Like if you're an ultra marathoner, you're not in balance.
Yeah.
you're not like having a life work balance and like, like whatever. You're doing something extreme,
Right.
in the sense that, and the same thing is true for, the power lifters and strongmen who are like, I need to be 340 pounds. It's the same kind of deal.
And it's funny because it does seem like a lot of men, younger as well as middle-aged men, achieve balance through this cycle of extremes where they'll go super hard on one thing and they'll go super hard on another, and they'll discover the downsides of that extreme. It's like, oh, I have no family life and my wife hates me now. And then they go hard family and then they lose a bunch of income. And like over time, this like ping pong cycle of extremes can give you a balanced life perhaps. And I think for guys who are motivated by competition or being the best or going hard, they're the guys who really connect with David Goggins. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the only way they can get there. And achieving not just balance, because you can be balanced and mediocre, but like balanced at higher levels of competence and excellence. And it seems to work.
Super true. That's super true for me. I think that was actually literally what I said to Jack on this subject of everything about balance in our group. Because at least for me, like, and I know this is probably like a male thing specifically, this is probably really common, but like I will find things to obsess over until I kind of reach the edges of my capabilities. And maybe I don't become an ultra marathon runner, but maybe I can actually run a marathon, and maybe I can actually deadlift 400, 500 pounds, and maybe you can actually have a good physique and also be like a proficient hunter or outdoorsman and have all of these skills where they're above average skills, but you're a very well-rounded individual because you have taken the time to obsess over these extremes and see what your limits are in each one of these areas. And that can make you, really capable at a lot of different things by doing that.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I approach stuff. I mean, I don't know how obsessive I get about any one thing. But I always say like, you can never stop exercising because otherwise you turn into a piece of shit. So, you're going to have to keep finding new shit to do because it gets boring. I mean, right now, 2 years ago, I could have spent 2 hours in the gym. And right now it's like, I look at my program and I'm like, I have about a 50-minute timer in my head that I'm like, I'm done now. I want to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. This is boring. And so I'll come back later and do cardio. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go somewhere else. And so, but I mean, like when we did that kettlebell stuff, I don't think I've had that much fun exercising as I did trying to catch those kettlebells. Like for the first time in forever. Fun. Yeah. I was like, and I'm still following these dudes who do the kettlebell flow and throw it over their heads and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, now I'm kind of like, I kind of want to like go out and do that again. Like it's fun, and so, yeah, you have to find different things all the time. So like right now, like Bronson's into running, like he was into lifting like a few years ago and now he's into running. And, it's also like what you can do. I mean, you're in India, like you're probably not going to start powerlifting in India because who knows, there might be a place or might not, depending on where you are. And also like, hunting is going to be kind of difficult, because you were doing a lot of hunting. Hunting isn't really, something they probably let you do, I would imagine. But
no, I don't think there'd be any animals in India if they allowed 2 billion people to just start hunting.
Right. So, like you have to find stuff that's available to you and the stuff that, is, interesting at a time until you get done with it. And then you go on to the next thing. And yeah, over time, I've thought about that even recently. I'm like, I've done a lot of things at this point. Like, and I have a lot of like basic competencies in a lot of these things that like, I forget that people don't know. Like someone commented when I did that stupid video about push-ups, like your form is really good. I was like, well, of course it is. I know how to do push-ups, but like, but we saw people who don't, so like,
I'm probably one of those people on that list.
I don't think I noticed that, but we had a few people who were half repping, and stuff like that. But, it's like, I've been taught by really professionals how to do that correctly, and so you start to get those things over time, which, like you said, you get this collection of like pretty solid skills and competencies. And I think that's one of the tragedies of life, though, is that that's one of the things that sucks, is that you spend all this time learning all this shit and then you just die. Like you get really, really good. Like, so many things. Like I have so many things I got good at, and then you just die.
Yeah. But I think on the other side of the the oscillating vicissitudes of extreme rabbit holes that young guys like to go down. Hopefully what is discovered on the other sides of the positives as well as the negatives of these extremities are things that are worth doing in themselves, and you come out with habits like push-ups or kettlebells, or in my case, things like running or chess or, whatever else that
or lifting orange rocks.
Orange rocks are pretty great.
I've gotten into the boulder lifting, and I have to say there is something to it that is different than just lifting heavy weights that I enjoy.
It is a little different, especially natural stones. We have to watch that full Sturker film at some point again, but there are some things that are good to do intrinsically, and hopefully in the journey through these islands of extremities, the good things can be extracted and brought into our regular life, and even to the point that they become maybe mundane some days. Like there are many days I go to work and I'm like, it's same shit, different day. But I'm still here. I don't have to be here. I could stay home and let, work online and make plenty of money that way. But no, I want to work with my hands. And then, a year later, after I've endured that, like the boredom or some like boring job that lasts 6 months of apartments or whatever, you come out very satisfied that you stuck it out. And I think running is one of those things that is like that. And there's this wide category of things that are like that aren't contingent upon, continued PRs, continued escalating improvement. I would be happy with doing nothing more than 2-mile runs, 4 days a week for the rest of my life. If I could never run more than 2 miles, that'd be fine. It's cool that I can go out and do 8, 10, 12 miles when I feel like it. Sometimes I can't now because I have too many people in my house to maintain. But, in the times, 2 miles is enough. Will I be able to lift the Dinny stones in Scotland? Probably not. But my 180-pound stone is pretty fun to lift, and I could keep doing that for ever,
I really like 2 miles about where I'm like, that's good for me. As far as running, it's not, not the big deal. But like the other day, the first day we did it, I ran 5 and then I couldn't walk right for like 3 days. And I was like, it's 105 degrees here. I'm not, but it's I'd have to get up early in the morning and go running before it gets hot out. But I actually really wish I could. I like more. It's not quite sprinting, but it is a PR chasing thing. Like in the way that the exact same mentality of is like if I could get a 225-pound overhead press again, the reps that you would put in and whatever to do that. In 2020, when I was I got a sub 6 mile time, and that was if you've seen me, I don't look like I should be able to run a sub 6 mile time. And I was always a fat kid. That is not a real thing. That I was at whatever early 40s that I was able to do that. And, but the process of that, I would really like to do that again. I mean, now it's too hot. This is probably not the right time of year, but, I prefer to do the exact opposite of Bronson. I want to be on a fucking track where it's the same every time, and I can hit that curve the same way every time because I'm trying to make I'm trying to make that mile time, and I have the right playlist. I'm doing the thing, and it's very much like lifting, almost like I'm like fucking hauling ass to get that done, and I actually really enjoy that. Like I get really excited and I have a lot of fun when I'm doing that kind of running.
That reminds me of a conversation I had with this guy that used to go to my gym back in BC, and he's like he's got a bunch of world records in Olympic lifting, but what he said, and it's kind of, I mean, it's just, that sounds like it's basically your mentality. I think it's probably most of our mentality, guys that really like to push ourselves, is, you may not reach your max deadlift or your max distant running all of the time, but each workout or whatever you're doing, you can find like new little PRs to chase. So maybe like you're not chasing, you're not trying to reach a marathon distance, but you can get to the point where you're running 1 mile as fast as you possibly can. Yeah. Or, maybe it's like a certain weight in the gym where you want to hit a certain amount of reps for as many reps as you can for that weight. And like, there's always different categories of limits that we can push to satisfy ourselves in all realms of physical pursuits.
Yeah. And they work well together. I did a 10-mile run early in May, and that was actually not too bad. I was not too difficult. I was keeping at like just over a 9-minute mile pace, which is not like fast at all. And then the next day I tried to do the fastest 1 mile I could. That was a lot harder. That is harder. But if you work both ends of that, you can become a better all-round runner. And I mean, Robert Pirsig has this line about fixing motorcycles. How do you fix a motorcycle? You have to be a good person, because if your relationships aren't good, then your headspace isn't going to be in the right place to identify the right problem. And if your motorcycle isn't running properly, you're going to be frustrated with that, and your relationship's not going to work. And like everything weaves together, which is, one of the points of pushing fitness so hard, is like, it is a good way to jumpstart your life just all around if you're just feeling better about your life. But running is a good way to do that. It's not the only way, maybe not even the best way, but it's a pretty good one. And for all those things we talked about earlier, it connects us with who we are as a species at that primordial level, and that's good for you as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's also, running in specific is a good opportunity to really, I guess, get into that type of headspace that you're talking about, where you can be a better person. And that's, again, to come back to the mythical side of it a little bit, is also what the Navajo do as a form of purification. And the only reason I'm talking about Navajo specifically is I have a little bit more knowledge about it than other Native American traditions, but as a form of purification, but also as a way to like cultivate future intentions, so it's considered rude while doing a spiritual run to, be distracted with noise, not be like listening to the sounds of nature, connecting with nature, the sounds around you. Because that also distracts from the goal of like clearing and purifying your mind so you can think good thoughts and think about your family and get into kind of more of a meditative state where you're clearing your mind to make room for better things. And I think it's really good for that too.
Or just to sit in the boredom, which also has utility. It was actually Jack who turned me on to David Foster Wallace years ago in a speech. It was sort of I think it was an indirect reference to an essay he wrote about how insincerity was killing culture. But I mean, among the other things,
because he was a leftist, I think.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean
I think I was, because I loved to throw. I used to love to throw out like little like just throw out like weird little thing to fuck with the audience.
But he's also not wrong. And,
right. Oh, yeah.
and I mean, David Foster Wallace, I think was in there with minds like Friedrich Nietzsche in arguing that, like, on the other side of boredom is like levels of experience and understanding that you can't really experience if you can't defer gratification, if you can't endure through the discomfort of boredom, and if you can't just wait and see, which is very hard in a smartphone and an internet age to do, but running provides access to that if you don't have your headphones in. At least I go back and forth. I run with headphones maybe 20% of the time, but I always feel like I regret it. It's fun in the moment, but it's a different feeling afterwards. It's not the same kind of rejuvenation that you get in running without headphones. In my own
bad
experience.
songs in my head. If I don't, I get worse song. Like with the cadence of my breathing dictates some like retarded like hook from a song, and then I have that in my head for the entire time. I do that when I hike too. Like I'll get like a thing in my head. I'm like, why am I singing this stupid song from the 70s that's now in my head that won't go away?
That's true. Cadences can be especially if someone played Rick Astley too recently in your past, you're basically fucked.
Yeah.
Well, to add to that, what you were saying about the boredom thing, I think it was also Michael Easter wrote about that quite extensively in The Comfort Crisis, basically about how we're never bored, almost ever. Like we're always either experiencing some kind of external stimulation, or we're on our phone. We can distract ourselves with things. We can distract ourselves with food, but boredom is quite literally where creativity is born. And so running, to allow yourself that boredom through the engagement of motion, and because running is very much a cycle, like you were saying, it's a rhythm. There's actually someone that was very close to me, who's another Indigenous person. It basically said, like, if you want to learn a song, like a traditional song, learn the song while riding horseback. And so by doing that, like you're getting into that rhythm and that cycle with the pattern of the way the horse is running. But that's the best way for you to learn a song and to I guess express your creativity and to be in like the flow of rhythm and the musicality of just that. And there's no music around, but other than the music that's coming from you. But that was a really interesting point that he made, is that just is like a spark of creativity through this galloping rhythmic state that you're in while riding horseback. And I think the same is kind of when you're running also. So I mean, that could just be something that would be interesting to be aware of and even practice while running to make it more enjoyable.
It's something we already quoted Nietzsche once, but Nietzsche and also Aristotle both thought that thinking ought to be something that you do while walking. In their case, from my experience, running can be made to work, though it's a little different. But it sort of goes back to that mental point before. It changes how you think. But if you don't have that boredom, if you don't have your brain, constantly on something, it always feels like some of the greatest mathematicians and scientists that purportedly have their breakthroughs like in the shower or on the bus. They'll be sitting on something, and it's like in those moments where your brain isn't actively engaged with content, it's actually doing things in the background. It's actually still working on problems that you had before. And if you're constantly keeping it distracted, your brain never gets the chance to work on those problems that you've been thinking through on your own.
Maybe I should be more bored so it happens more quickly. Because I always refer to that as a washing machine. Like there's an idea there, and like it needs to go through the wash until it comes. It needs to keep tumbling
That's a
until
good metaphor.
it comes out. You know, like
Yeah.
maybe a rock tumbler would be better until it gets polished or whatever. But like metaphorically speaking, but no, I mean, because I have things. I'm like, yeah, it's not ready yet. It's not. I know it's not ready yet. Like it's not there. But then it just might just be. There's the mindset of like you just have to sit down at your desk and write until there's that guy. But there is something that while you're walking or running or moving, your brain does work better or in a different way. Last time I had to rehearse a speech, I was doing it. I actually was like, I'm just going to walk around the neighborhood and do it that way instead of standing in the room. Cause you get like, you're in the place all the time and like, it's hard to do it, but I'm like, oh, I'm walking and I'm talking.
It
And
like
also
traps you in a one perspective almost, and it's like a different motion pattern and a different setting, so it causes you to see your own thoughts in a different way.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I used to love it, especially when I was in Oregon, because there was a lot of close to the city. There was a lot of hikes before it just became a trash place. But it's I used to go out, for hikes with my friends a lot. Some of my smart guy friends, like we'd go out talking and you have the best talks on hikes, because you're moving rather than like, oh, we're going to sit and like have beers and cigars or whatever. But if you're going to have like, we're having more advanced conversation or more interesting conversation, your mind goes a different place or whatever. And it becomes a really active conversation if you're walking and talking at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
that can be a really good community building thing too. I mean, not everyone is going to obviously run marathons, but like just look at what happens when people get together to run marathons. Like, you're connecting with people from different age groups, different backgrounds, all in this kind of like shared pursuit, but it's also an individual pursuit and you're encouraging each other. And whether it's like running or hiking or any kind of like form of movement like that, or even the kettlebells, like, because you have so many guys who are not really into kettlebells, and it's going to be a process for them to learn the tricks and learn the different movements they haven't done before. But like that's also a really great community builder, is these kinds of like movement pursuits. Because like I think with weightlifting it can be, but that's like much more, I think, in individual when it comes to like competition. But running can be very, you can very much feed off of each other in competition.
Well, to go back to that primordial setting, human persistence hunting was a group activity, a pack activity, to compare us to wolves. And Christopher McDougall has a long section about the effects of running in a group versus running alone. And he found that people who run, and especially who train in groups, consistently wind up going not just farther, but also faster and more comfortably. Mm-hmm. Something about being in that group dynamic actually makes it enjoyable in a way that running by yourself does not for most of the people.
Yeah, it passes the time. I mean, you can, if you, in the way that if I have to spend an hour in elliptical, I'll do an AMA. Like, oh, well, I'm talking to people, I'm doing things. I don't even know that I've been on elliptical for an hour. I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, the same thing when you're out, doing any activity with people who you're interacting with and have a conversation. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, we lost Bronson again. You can do a whole bunch of stuff that you wouldn't be able to do. You would get bored doing. You get bored doing that stuff without people there. And to your point about the, just lifting generally, that's a function of headphones. What's happened to like gyms is a function of headphones, because gyms used to be very social and now they're not. I actually, because I'm new in town, that's been one of my strategies. It barely ever works because everybody else has their headphones in, but I have taken to just not wearing headphones a lot of times because I'm not trying to hit a PR or whatever. I don't need to be in some space. I'm just walking around, going through the motions, doing the laundry. And so, I want to make myself available that someone could actually come up and say hi or like make a comment or something like that. And no one will talk. If I have those headphones on, no one will do that. And
No,
so
you're
like,
not in the energy with everyone else. Yeah.
yeah. And so like cause if I think about, um, we keep talking about powerlifting just because there's a common experience, but I mean, like when I first started at the powerlifting gym, at Chris Duffin's gym, when it was in a shitty little like strip mall before it became a huge big thing. Um, wow. Like you walked in and there's like 15 dudes rotating into bench on the same bench, holding out plates for each other, moving things. Everybody's talking, everybody's doing. There is so much energy in that. It was so cool. I mean, and they're doing the powerlifting stuff where you hold boards for people, like so to control their range of motion and all that shit that they're doing. And it was so social.
I feel like
so engaging.
Like Venice Beach back in the 80s in California is like that distilled in like one place.
Yeah, I mean, find me that anywhere and I will go there. I mean, I don't want to powerlifting at all, but find me that energy anywhere and I want to be there. And that's why people like CrossFit, because it's a group thing where people are talking the entire time, and like it's a social community building thing rather than everybody put on their headphones and like go away into their own musical space and zone and whatever and not talk to each other, which unfortunately is what commercial gyms are now. But yeah, anything where you have people interacting is community building. Yeah. And especially what I was saying for having a conversation, I think especially with men, walking and talking is better. I mean, obviously we're doing Zoom, whatever, now, we can do it. Okay. We're all right. But, men talk better shoulder to shoulder. It's how we're really meant to operate because it's non-confrontational. And, that men share feelings better shoulder to shoulder. Cause it's not like I'm scared, like it's not like this weird, uncomfortable, like energy. You'll have two men walking beside each other, whether you're walking or hiking or whatever, and they'll talk about all kinds of shit, because it's non-confrontational. It's not like it's not weird. Like you're looking into each other's eyes, like it's very comfortable for men to talk while they're walking and while they're doing an activity, so I think
that's because you're in a place of power. Like, you're doing an activity with other men. You're either hiking or you're walking or you're running or you're, building something together. It's like that shoulder to shoulder. It's like you're in a place of power with those men you're talking about maybe some ideas that are sensitive, but like you're not disempowered by your body language and the activity that you're doing. You sit down face to face, crouch down in your little chair, and like, immediately you're consulting a friend in that position. It's like, if you're the person sharing, your vulnerabilities, you're kind of immediately putting yourself beneath the guy that you're asking for advice from, rather than being his equal in a shared effort.
Yeah. You're just two guys walking about. So this bullshit happened the other day, blah, 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 blah. And you're just walking along, telling them what's went on. And that's fine. And it's not confessional, in the same way.
And shoulder to shoulder, you're working towards some end. You're accomplishing something, whether that's killing a deer or at least just getting to the finish of a race or installing something or whatnot. I mean, too long face to face, at least if you're a guy, I think, you could begin to get this almost claustrophobic sense that you're just wasting time.
Yeah.
And I have met people who never get that sensation. I do. I think most guys probably do. And they're like, I have to do something. Even if that something is nothing, but literally anything other than just more.
Well, that's why a lot of them drink, because drinking is a thing.
That's true.
Drinking is an activity.
It's accomplishing something.
That's why people are doing it. They're like, we're drinking. We're doing a thing. And that's how they share when they're talking about, because they're doing an activity. It's not just like, like where they're just crossing their hands and like looking at each other, like they're doing a thing. Like we're drinking.
Dovetails back to that addiction subject.
Oh, yeah.
you whether we're doing alcohol or caffeine or
Yeah.
marathons
Everybody's
or
addiction
heroin.
yeah.
Marathons are maybe not the worst addiction to have.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. I just thought it was funny, and that's the other way they bring it. It's not any worse than anything else. It's just I always thought it was funny because when I would hear my sister talking about it, it was literally like the guys who could not stop benching. Like she's like, I know I should stop. Like, I should probably ratchet it down, but I really like it. And it becomes it's also because it becomes anything like that. I mean, addiction is kind of like a victim-y language speak anyway. But anything where it becomes part of your identity, then becomes really hard to quit. Like if you're if you're known, I mean, okay, my sister's been in the newspaper for being a marathon runner and like she's that's who she is. Like that's part of that's her special identity. And same thing with powerlifters. Like if they can't bench 3 wheels, they don't even know who they are anymore. Like that's like who am I? What am I? And so that's where I think it becomes the thing. And that's probably true of most sports that you get really, really into. Like once you can't do them anymore, then you kind of like, who am I? Unless you have another anchoring pursuit that is part of your identity. But a lot of people just have that one thing because, you work in modern life, you get to work your job and then you get one hobby, like you get to have your one hobby and family and whatever. So you get the one hobby and that's what most people do. And so that's their thing. And so it's hard for them to let go of something like that.
Yeah. Well, and
it also begs the question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say,
I think I'm delayed, so I keep sounding like I'm trying to interrupt you guys, but I'm not. Yeah. it's this phone.
The question of addictions and hobbies, sort of the follow-up question is then, well, how do you go about choosing that one hobby? Because there's a wide range of like video games and other distractions and escapist activity. And it's not like running isn't escapism of a kind, but not all of them are equal. I don't think in what they tap into psychologically and physically, and what they provide for you. I guess we're talking spiritually as well. And I think of the hobbies on offer, running is a uniquely good one, compared to even compared to lifting. As great as lifting is, and we've been talking about lifting now for a while on the running podcast, but it's a phenomenal thing to do. But no human is ever going to be as strong as a chimp, let alone a gorilla. Like there are other mammals that are stronger than humans,
right?
But there are no mammals who are as good of runners as humans. Like it has that species defining quality that makes it a uniquely interesting thing to connect with and to develop at a higher level, I think, compared to, model trains and chess and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at something like lifting, I mean, that's new. We were talking about that the other day. I was like, we were talking about body types and how they changed and whatever. And, it's like, well, they only invented weights in like like whatever. I mean, real weights, that was an early 20th century thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I remember the companies that there were like 2 or 3 companies in America. And that started, and, it was wild because it's changed the world in a weird way. But people didn't look that way before, but they did run. They were running before that.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I mean, they've been running for a really long time. In fact, what you didn't pull in, is I was thinking about it where you're talking about Odysseus is that, I mean, obviously there's a whole like historical mythological thing with marathon itself.
Yes, I forget the hero's name who runs all the way back from the battlefield, yells victory, and then dies.
Yeah,
it's a testament to human endurance that we can replicate that feat hundreds of thousands of times a year with all variety of human specimens, and very few people die. You know, he must have been running pretty hard. But yeah, there's that. There's of course the Andean messenger couriers running their thousands of miles of road that they made, and probably soldiers throughout all of time who had to march long distances, and then they had their charges and all that. But yeah, running is, I'm sure if we went back, especially on the Amerindian side and the Native American or the Greek and African side, you could probably find more myths with running. But it's it's very, very old. Maybe as old as humanity itself.
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as opposed to like weight training or
oh, well, yeah, definitely. It's older than that.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, Bronson, are you really there? I don't think so. I think he's frozen. I'm like, are you there? Are you just really still, or
just hold a really, really steady pace?
Yeah, I couldn't tell if he was doing that or not. Did I just lose you now too? Oh no, there you go.
Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
we'll give him another second, and so we can sign off. But it was a good range.
Yeah, well, and I hope anyone who listens to this at least won't be able to say the like, what are you running from? Long distance runners are like, not or like prey animals. Unironically, the jokes will continue, and that's all fun and good. But like that's not really how it works.
Yeah, no. I think if anything, the running from would be a person. It's at human distances and human speeds. If you're going to be running away from somebody, it wouldn't be a fucking grizzly bear because good luck.
And you have to imagine too. Like imagine you are a deer. Yeah. And you get ambushed by a cougar. You're like, oh shit. And you take off running. The cougar's hot in your heels, and you get over a hill and you think you've lost it. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh shit, he's still there. And it's another sprint. Pretty sure you lost him for good. You're mostly in the clear. With humans, it's different. It's like, oh shit, there's like 5 humans over there. So you run. Oh shit, they're still there. Repeat for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Like you can never get rid of these people. And just when you think you've lost them, like skinwalkers emerging through the woods, maybe they're wearing antlers too. Who knows? Yeah. Like they just won't stop. Right. There's almost something more dread inducing in that, like terrifying manner of the persistence predator than the jump scare of the predatory cat or something.
Yeah, well, they won't waste the energy. Like after you get X amount of time, and then you're good. Yeah, but yeah. People are hateful, and they will hunt you for a long time. I mean, that's what's that I always love that title. I think it was a short story, and then it became a film at some point. But the Most Dangerous Game.
Yes,
like that's clear. Humans are the most dangerous game, and but that's also part of human evolutionary history as well, because there's at no point were we not killing each other.
Oh yeah,
at no point were we not hunting and killing each other.
That predates humanity.
That's part of our evolutionary heritage as well. It's not just hunting. So, I mean, that's an interesting point to think about as well.
Oh, for sure. I think the reason people don't associate long distance running with in the same way that we would have in the like ancient primordial past is that today you can just run to a place where there are other people and you're probably fine. But 6,000 years ago, that might not have been the case. Right. You don't have a police station to run to. You don't have, your car to run to. You don't have like the public, to run to. Way back in the day, back when our psychology of association became what it is.
Right.
So That's that was the pet peeve I wanted to do away with, but the values, of course, extend beyond beating bad jokes to death. So
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one of those things. Running will kill all your gains, and da 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 da. And it's the reality is that that's only true at the extremes of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. If you go out and run for fucking 5 miles, it's not gonna. Your legs aren't gonna get smaller.
Well,
that's not real.
And like the other thing is like, who do you want to be too?
Right.
Like there you could be Hafthor Bjornsson if you have the right genetics for it, or you could be Cameron Haynes,
Yeah.
who can lift more than most of these guys and can run. And maybe you're neither. Maybe you can run 5 miles, but not really much more, and you can bench 210 pounds, but not a lot more. But you can also read the classics, and you can also relate to people, and you can also earn money, and you can also, like do lots of things instead of just one thing really well.
This too is the lot of man.
Yeah. Well, it might be a better way to live in terms of your experience of life. There are more things to enjoy, and even at deeper levels than just doing one thing.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that my boxing coach had us do, which I thought was really cool. I mean, aside from the running 5 miles, 1 mile every day for sure, but like 5 miles some days. Really, when he didn't feel like dealing with us, just like go see you in an hour or whatever. But one thing that he did have us do, which I thought was fantastic, it wasn't quite sprinting, but it wasn't quite a mile. Was he would set it up for like round times.
Is it interval training?
Basically. Yeah, like
those are the worst.
And the goal of it was to do it all nasal breathing. Go as fast as you can, but with nasal breathing, whatever, because part of your panic response in like fighting or whatever is when you start to do the whole like that's panicky right there. Like you're doing panicky. Like if you can be like, you're already more in control, and also, and I think it proves you have better cardio too, but like, it's like, it also depends how many times your nose has been broken, which would get where fight guys would get in trouble, I think, with that. But because a lot of them can't breathe through their nose half the time. But as far as being able to control your breath, I thought that was a really cool exercise for this crazy little railroad guy that was our boxing coach. But like, he's like, like he was having us run. It was like nighttime, and we're out like running as fast as we can. Like it was like a certain amount of blocks and then back, and we're trying to beat like 4 minutes, because it was like for a 4-minute round, and 4 minutes or 5 minutes, I forget what it was, but that we were trying, that was how long we were supposed to run for, and to try and do that with nasal breathing. So because it's like if you can sprint that whole time, you're probably gonna be fine with fighting.
Yeah, I remember back from track and field and like middle school, and the always the most painful days, half the days I would throw up, was the 200-yard interval training days.
Yeah.
Like halfway around the track, walk back, do that like 7 or 8 times, you're done. That was absolutely brutal. Probably really good. A little different exercise than endurance running, like persistence hunting style, just like running a marathon, but also valuable, and we'll get you in good shape.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I was just telling him, Bronson, are you really there? Oh yes, he's moving again.
Excellent.
Right. Oh no, we lost him.
I actually do have to get going here as well, so
we'll wrap up. I was waiting for him to come back so we could sign off, but I think he's going to have issues there in India.
Gotcha.
So, but anyway, man, thanks for joining me on this, and we're going to do some more of these. We have to maybe even do one tomorrow. We'll talk about it later. start putting out some more podcasts for the Order of Fire for our members and for the people who are watching online. And hopefully I get to have Bronson back on at some point to talk about traveling in India for like a year and more. I think he's been gone for more than a year now.
I think so. That sounds about right.
Yeah, and I think he never wants to come back, which is kind of awesome in its own way. But anyway, great talking to you, man. I'll talk to you again soon, and see everybody later. Stay solar.
Absolutely.
Pater is the cultural arm of the Order of Fire. For more, visit PH2T3R.com.